Hello and welcome everybody to the round one of our very first season 3 weekly event. I'm here with aReNGee and we are jumping straight into a game that is already underway. We have Redworld here on Combry Blue against ScrapBrain on TJP Control.
Yeah, and unfortunately, due to some production issues, we do not currently have a hand cam for you guys. We're just looking at Redworld's perspective, but we should have that in for probably the second match, or the second game. So, looking here, Redworld is a little bit screwed on power.
Yeah, he is a little bit behind here, which is pretty unfortunate for him. He did have a Scorpion Wasp there on that turn, so that was nice. He actually did clean up a Sandstorm Titan, but not hitting his power now, falling a little bit behind ScrapBrain, who's on this troll variant. The lists that they're playing are actually very similar.
Yeah, Redworld's he's a bit more unit focused, whereas I believe ScrapBrain is trying to go with a bit more of a control focused plan. It's interesting that Redworld decided not to deploy the Seraph last turn. It looks like he's trying to play for some sort of harsh rule reset.
Yeah, it's entirely possible that I think Redworld is going to just try and poke in some damage here and reset, but now the board isn't looking that good. Like it's not great for reset, and due to that C power, he's not going to be able to hit it anyway. So now comes the interesting question of can Redworld afford to hold off an extra turn to wait for that harsh rule, or does he need to start committing to the board now?
I think it depends on what you want to do. Your board as it stands is holding back both of your opponent's units, and ScrapBrain has a whole lot of cards in hand, so you probably want to get him to commit a bit more into that harsh rule before you send it off. Um, but Redworld's probably gonna be leaning on those high value combre cards, the Mystic Ascendant and the Seraph, in order to generate a lot of value to cut through just the sheer card advantage that ScrapBrain's been able to accumulate.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because ScrapBrain actually is playing at least one Mystic Ascendant, a Misfailed Drake. He actually has a few of those in-game threats himself, on top of the obvious Seraphs and Titans. So he's got a decent bit of units here, and Redworld finally deciding that he's going to commit that harsh rule to taking off the Seraph now that ScrapBrain is up to 8 power.
Yeah, I'd probably just worried about the ultimate ability. It's not the greatest trade for him since he's trading 2 cards for 2 cards of his opponents, but it does allow him to freely deploy this Mystic Ascendant, or sorry, this Martial Ironthorn, as ScrapBrain didn't really have that exciting a follow-up with just a Combray healer.
Yeah, and ScrapBrain clearly having a pause at the end of turn probably has either a Desert Marshal or a Scorpion Wasp that he could have gotten in there. So a little bit of information given over to Redworld, thinks he needs to be playing around when he's attacking with these units.
Looks like the majority of his hand is defensive since he doesn't have a lot of units to play out, or he could just be respecting the harsh rule that Redworld has already shown. But I'd imagine that he's sitting on a couple removal spells, maybe some harsh rules of his own, and just doesn't have that much offensive stuff to really punish Redworld's early power stumbles.
Yeah, yeah, and that's definitely the way it seems like it's turning out. We see Sandstorm Titan just kind of hanging out here, about to hopefully get in for a little bit of damage. But there was that Scorpion Wasp that we found out about 2 turns ago. Gets in there and cleans up the Sandstorm Titan. And Redworld just going to go ahead and get his Mystic Ascended down and start powering it up with these power.
Ooh, draws a second one. That's always nice to see as a combat player. Although I imagine this first one isn't going to be that long for the world.
Yeah, probably not. We'll probably see ScrapBrain either get in with some sort of Desert Marshal silence to stop it, or we'll see a harsh rule come down to go ahead and clean this board up. It's unfortunate when you have to 1-for-1 with your harsh rules, but sometimes it's necessary. But I think we did just see, yeah, Desert Marshal come down, go ahead and put the silence on the Mystic Ascendant, just turning it back into a regular 6/6. But we do see the second Mystic Ascendant floating around in Redworld's hand, so it won't be too long before he can get that one out and start pumping it up again.
Well, the overly reactive hand of ScrapBrain is now starting to take a toll as Redworld's actually turned the corner in card advantage. He's got these Mystic Ascendants that he can get rolling, and he's got more cards in hand than ScrapBrain, plus plenty of threats there. So, um, I think Redworld's actually advantaged here now.
Yeah, I do as well. I think he's definitely turned that corner, and he's got plenty of defensive options in case he needs to reset the board. But he's also got two nice game plans himself in Seraph and this Mystic Ascendant to go ahead and either gain him more card advantage or just pump out a win condition. So we will see. He's going to get in there with that. And ScrapBrain's still with nothing coming down, more than likely lacking any units. So just having to play this defensively. And that's it's going to give Redworld an opportunity to go ahead and put some damage in here, clean it up. See a block here. Have a feeling that means ScrapBrain's willing to commit to a harsh roll next turn.
Yeah, and it looks like Redworld's just willing to play it slow, say, okay, I've played a 6/6, you must deal with it before I'm willing to commit any other threats. And honestly, if ScrapBrain's not going to do anything, Redworld doesn't really need to commit anything else out there. ScrapBrain's eventually going to have to deal with this, or it's just going to kill him.
Yeah, very true. Redworld will have to play at least a sigil or a power next turn. That way he doesn't have to discard. But outside of that, I mean, yeah, he's in a prime position to take this game. And ScrapBrain looking to find another Visage to go with the one he got down. And we see that Harsh Rule finally come out, and ScrapBrain with a Mystic Ascendant power up of his own. So we're going to see if Redworld is going to opt to fire off his own Harsh Rule and set a board up.
Looks like as he just slams that down, it looks like yes, he's willing to clean that up and deploy his own threat.
Yeah, this is what the Combray type matchups really look like when you get down to it. Is when you're playing these like very high value decks where almost every single one of these units could just carry a game by itself. We will see a lot of these harsh rules getting fired off just to clean up a single unit, and this is also a part of Combray lacking a lot of direct removal, not playing Shadow, so no access to just directly shutting units down.
So this is a bit of an interesting spot, as we're going to see a double block here on the Sandstorm Titan.
And I think Redworld was trying to bait that on purpose to get the Desert Marshal out so he could get the cleanup with the Lightning Storm and just establish a new board. I think he was actually comfortable trading there, and he already knew about the ambush due to the pauses on ScrapBrain's turn. So I have to imagine that was a completely calculated play.
Yeah, well, I mean, even if there isn't a Desert Marshal, the worst that happens is just the two Sandstorm Titans bounce off each other, and he may have elected to go for the Lightning Storm trade just to clean up the board regardless. But here we see Seraph come down on 11 power and hits a nice little I believe that's a Minotaur Ambassador. So Great Parliament's now going to be tossing out 3 owls. Really good follow-up once all the harsh rules are finally gone.
Yeah, this is going to be crazy. I think Redworld has finally turned that corner. ScrapBrain's definitely going to need another harsh rule to at least get a reset. But even then, Redworld just has so much power in his hand he can reload with. He's got another Seraph, or he can just reestablish with the 3 owls from the Great Parliament.
Well, ScrapBrain does have it, and it is foil, so it does extra damage to the units. But I think Redworld just has too many cards in hand at this point, and ScrapBrain's not going to be able to recover in time.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you are correct here. This Great Parliament itself already poses a threat that's going to have to be answered with another harsh rule. And then on top of that, like we see him holding Seraph in hand, and with 11 power, he can already go ahead and drop it and activate it like we saw a second ago. So Seraph is an extra big threat, and any of these Great Parliament pickups are also really scary for ScrapBrain. It just creates such a big board now that Redworld's got 14 power.
Yeah, Redworld's actually playing the full 4 Great Parliaments, so he's got plenty of potential excellent draws in the late game.
Ooh, and this is actually really interesting. ScrapBrain getting in for 2 here, and he gets the Mistveil Drake down. This is really interesting, but we see Redworld gonna just go ahead and fire the Desert Marshal off into this, so that next turn he can Valkyrie Enforcer it down to a ground unit and start attacking with all of these owls in the air.
Personally, I would have just waited a turn and gone with the Combray Healer, your Aegis, Valkyrie Enforcer, your guy line. Just to hold on to that Desert Marshal, but that's fine too. You've got multiple silences and a really big board here. Again, ScrapBrain's going to need another harsh rule, and I think he's already used 3, if I'm not mistaken.
He's
But
definitely
here, okay. So he does not have a lot of copies left. We do see Seraph get silenced, but that's a big board, and a lot of it is flying.
yeah, it's going to have to be another harsh rule. I don't think there's any other way out of this game at this point, and it's looking like ScrapBrain's just not going to be able to do it here. Yeah, Redworld eating that 10 damage, not worried about the TJP control deck really pressuring him. We do see a staff of stories come down, but that's going to be almost just lethal on the board. He's got 17, I believe.
Uh,
18.
it puts him to 1.
Now,
Although,
ooh, this is an interesting line out of Redworld. I don't really think he needed to even put the Sandstorm Titan down, but he's putting it down just to make sure that the 2/5 doesn't get permafrosted, and then he just dies on the attack. So I'm gonna see some chump blocks here out of him.
yeah, he did get pretty low, so just an insurance. I don't think that there was enough cards left um, for ScrapBrain to actually turn that. But now that I'm thinking about it, if he had the longest slow rolled permafrost in the world plus an extra vanquish, he could have maybe done that. But um, he does take it down. He does fall, and Redworld takes down the first game. And now we've got a live view of Redworld sideboarding here for us. And there's a bit of an interesting card there, wasn't there? You want to talk about that, Bairdrus?
Yeah, I'm sure at least a couple of our players caught that there was a Shadow Sigil and an Azendal's Gift in this TJP control sideboard. This is to bring in for the control type matchups, and since there are 4 Find the Ways and 4 Seek Powers in the main of this deck, it's not too crazy to go ahead and fish out even just a single Shadow Source to turn that Azendal's Gift live, and then you can go ahead and start using that against the control decks to essentially lock them out of playing the game.
Yeah, and Redworld has a pretty good deck for going into the long game, even just in his main board. Those Parliaments, as we saw, one-man armies. Knight Chancellor Seraph builds you up a lot of units. Martial Ironthorn and Mystic Ascendant build you up a lot of value. So basically, Redworld sort of already pre-sideboarded for going long, all that stuff is in his main deck. In his sideboard, he doesn't actually have all that many things. Might want a Decay to bring in if he feels that the Stronghold Visages of his opponent are going to be particularly annoying. Um, he's got 2 Celestial Omens. I imagine the Gift will come in. This seems like a pretty good matchup for it. But if you're going to go for the Gift, you're going to need some kind of way to break the Aegis, as ScrapBrain is playing the Island's favors that give him Aegis.
Yeah, and interesting right now, Vanquish getting pulled out of the deck. I guess he's not too worried about units in the TJP control deck, which is relatively fair, but there are quite a lot of for being a control deck, TJP has quite a lot of units in. We saw the Mistveil Drake, the Mystic Ascendants, the set of Sandstorm Titans, the set of Seraphs. Like, there definitely are a lot of targets that you will want.
Yeah, that's an interesting choice. He does have a lot of silences. Then, of course, as we know, Vanquish doesn't hit Seraph, which is your main scary card. He may be just relying on harsh rules to reset if Mystic Ascendant ever comes down, and expecting himself to be on the aggressive against his opponent.
Yeah, we're going to see how this turns out. Redworld already up 1-0, about to get back into the challenge. If the players are still taking a second, we can go ahead and dive into the other player's sideboard. Check out this TJP control out of ScrapBrain.
Sure. So what he has in the sideboard is a couple of interesting cards that you haven't seen that much yet. In his main deck, he's playing a bit of a smattering of cards in the higher slots. You know, everybody sees Lightning Storm, Combra Healer, Seraph before, but his higher curve, he's playing Stronghold Visage, two of them. One Staphosaurus, which we saw last game, one Mystic Ascendant, one Mistville Drake, and one Channel the Tempest. So sort of a player's choice selection of game enders, if you will. So in his sideboard, he's playing the additional options. I can't speak. He's playing two Rain of Frogs, which he could use to pick off a key unit or card of Redworlds, like the Grand Parliaments are annoying, Seraph, of course, something like that, and turn those into harmless frogs. He's got another Stronghold Visage, which I don't expect we'll see come in. Three Throne Wardens, which is interesting and another good way to get armor. And finally, up at the top of the curve, we've got a Sword of the Sky King. So that big sword will probably come in as another game ender.
Yeah, I definitely like to
But
see the sword come in. For sure. That will definitely help him out in the match. But we are actually already in game 2 currently. Redworld deciding to keep his opening hand, and there is that Shadow Sigil that we talked about in the sideboarding floating around. So Azadul's Gift will be live at any time if he draws it. And besides that, Redworld with a mostly defensive hand, 2 Harsh Rules and a Cumber Healer.
yeah, whoops, I talked a little bit too long about sideboarding, and the players had made their decisions already. Redworld just holding on to that Comber Healer, of course, doesn't really contest the board into anything, and he's playing for those Harsh Rules.
Yeah,
at the
definitely.
moment.
And it's going to be interesting. Going to be a really slow start out of both players. Again, not seeing anything particular come down. No Comber Healers. ScrapBrain may get like a Sandstorm Titan or something down, but nope, nothing this turn. So Redworld just going to go ahead and fish out an extra sigil so that he can get this Mystic Ascendant online next turn and start pumping it up.
Yeah, this is just sort of a control mirror versus a control mirror at its finest, where both players are just drawing cards and playing power. Looks like Redworld's willing to play the Ascendant early on just to get that early draw.
Yeah, and I actually like the Ascendant coming down here. It pressures ScrapBrain into having an answer. So ScrapBrain's either going to have a Scorpion Wasp to pick it up if Redworld even dares swing with it. Otherwise, he's going to have a removal here. And then what Redworld was actually hoping for there was that ScrapBrain would have been forced to use a Harsh Rule. That way he could get this Great Parliament down. But I have a feeling we might see Great Parliament come down anyway, just putting out 2 Owls. And
Interesting.
Redworld deciding whether or not he wants to put this into what is likely a Harsh Rule out of ScrapBrain. That is an interesting dynamic of playing with the TJP style decks, is that they generally are packing those Harsh Rules since they are playing 4, and they're probably going to have 1 in their opening hand or in their opening draw set, but we don't see it immediately out of ScrapBrain, maybe choosing to hold it, instead allowing this Wasp to go ahead and take down an Owl.
So personally, I find these playing out these cards seems to be working out for Redworld, but I find it a little bit interesting that he does so. He does have those 2 Harsh Rules to hold on to, and his opponent, his deck is just less set up to play for the late game than Redworld is. Redworld's just basically playing all the late game haymakers that you can play. So personally, I wouldn't have been surprised if he just said, I've got the better late game, you're not doing anything to pressure me, I'm hitting my power drops, let's just sit here, and just built up an overwhelming hand. But because ScrapBrain does not actually have those perfect answers, and he might have been able to draw into them later, it's working out really well for Redworld that he's gone for this slightly more aggressive line. Yes, I know he started playing cards on turn 8, and that's kind of silly for me to be saying aggressive, but I mean, Seraph doesn't really come online until 11 when you can play and use her in the same turn.
Yeah, and we probably won't see that until this board gets cleaned up at least once with a Harsh Rule from one side or the other. It's interesting that you mentioned that Redworld does have the 2 Harsh Rules. I think he's just going to rely on these primarily for a backup plan. He's going to see if he can force this game out with just the Owl over and over, and eventually force ScrapBrain to use his answers. And by the time he uses his board clears and reestablishes what little units he has, Redworld's free to use these Harsh Rules to clean up and then reestablish threats of his own.
Yeah, and for the moment, it looks like ScrapBrain's having a real tough time just even dealing with the single owl that's left over. It's done what, like 16 damage? So,
Yeah,
oh,
something
and
like that at this point. But now we see the sword of the Sky King come down, and this is going to be interesting to see if Redworld can deal with it. He puts the 1 point on there and saves his owl, but the owl will only push it down to 3. Ooh, and the Desert Marshal finally coming in. Been holding on to that one. Go ahead and get a sweet little trade here and take the owl out for free, blocking with both the 2/5s.
so here you want to deploy the harsh rule because ScrapBrain just has such the better board. But he's also got the Sword of the Sky King, which is going to clean up basically any unit that you can play into it. So now Red World's in a bit of a tough spot.
Yeah, he is. He's going to be relying very heavily on what comes out of this Seraph. He's looking for something very big, hopefully over 8 health. That way he can get around the Sword of the Sky King. The Seraph will get cleaned up regardless. Civic Peacekeeper, not really what he was looking for. Would have liked something much bigger.
Looks like we got another Desert Marshal coming down.
Oh yeah, and Desert Marshal silencing the Seraph and able to block means that actually he can just go ahead and clean up the Civic Peacekeeper as the 6/6. And this is where, yeah, Red World's really sad that that Seraph didn't kick out a much bigger unit. If it had hit a 5/5, for example, coming out as a 10/10, would have been a much bigger problem for ScrapBrain to deal with the Sword of the Sky King not going to be able to clean it up. But
It
we do see.
looks like Red World's going to be okay just putting out another 3 owls. I'm not sure how much I find that this plays a little bit scary into Harsh Rule specifically, as you could have played something like the Valkyrie Enforcer or the Sandstorm Titan in order to put the same pressure on the Sword of the Sky King, while having the owls as a backup plan in case of Harsh Rule. But we'll see how it works out.
Yeah, we will indeed. And Redworld luckily picking up another Seraph off the top of the deck, going to be able to go ahead and start activating this one. But you're right, this board looks super juicy for a harsh roll right here.
Hmm.
If ScrapBrain can manage to rip one, he could easily start to swing this game back in his favor, given that the players are almost even in card advantage.
Yeah, and it's not inconceivable that he's been slow rolling one, um, choosing to use the sword to chop down the units instead. But nothing for the moment. And a Scorpion Wasp will take out the Field Captain, I believe that card is. Don't see that too much outside of draft.
Yeah, that is a field captain, and ooh, interesting. We see a rare hero of the people pickup. So this is going to be interesting. He actually could give that quite a few keywords in his deck. He's got endurance and flying already right there. He mouses it over. Seraph would give it overwhelm. So could actually get this up to a reasonably scary unit.
Do you know if Hero of the People triggers off of Seraph plays? I think it does. So really, he
Uh,
could give it anything.
yeah, that is true. Due to the Seraph activations, I think those skills will trigger Hero of the People. So this could become quite interesting. Maybe we'll get a sweet little Akaria flip to end the game right there.
We're a little bit on the low roll side of Seraph, and Seraph pulls a Desert Marshal to take down the other Seraph immediately.
Actually,
Um,
yeah, he's gonna go with the miss. Whoa, well, that's interesting. If he was gonna pop the Aegis, I'm surprised he didn't just go all in on the plan and commit to taking down the Mistveil Drake and pushing 8 damage this turn. Or it would have even been 11 with the flyer. Like he could have guaranteed 11 damage there. It's kind of interesting.
I think that line's a little bit aggressive, leaving a active Seraph on your opponent's side of the table. Um,
I
but I agree that it was a little bit strange that he chose to Desert Marshal the Mistveil Drake there. You would have anticipated that he would have just silenced the Seraph and held on to his Valkyrie Enforcer, or used both of them in combination, since he sort of, needed 3 silences to really deal the full deal there.
yeah, this is just like this line seems really slow to me, and I would have really liked to see the Mistveil Drake because while you are correct, the Seraph can go off. Seraph still needs to pull a Sandstorm Titan or a flying unit to even block all these flyers because Redworld on the follow up, this would have been his follow up turn, and now he's holding what is this 14 power. Like that's a lot of power to go ahead and stop in the air. And I really don't think ScrapBrain would have been able to do it. It would have forced ScrapBrain to go ahead and have a harsh rule, fire it off, and even then, Redworld's not too upset about that, holding a harsh rule and a sandstorm Titan as his own reload with. And that was always kind of the out anyway for ScrapBrain. Let's go ahead and pick that up.
Well, now we've got two of Redworld's cards sort of not combining very well with each other, as Marison chews up the board very quickly, leaving not a lot of room for Siraf to drop units out.
And there
Oh
it
my
is.
God.
There it is. There's the Ikarion, the hero of the people play, baby. We see a giant. We see a 10/10 Ikaria and an 8/8 hero of the people that may as well read as Ikaria. And that is going to do it, closing out that series 2-0. So we are going to go ahead and jump over to a second matchup. Oh, sorry. I just heard our backup match is over. So unfortunately, we will not be jumping to a second match, but we will be taking a short break before the end of round one. We have Loco Pojo VOD on the beginner's guide and also his Mauler's deck tech that will hopefully be coming up. So stay tuned, check those videos out, and we will be back very shortly with round two.